Hello, friends. Today we have with us a very special guest, Dr. Nilesh Oak. Basically, he's a chemical engineer, used to work for a multinational like General Electricals in US for about 16, 70 years, was fascinated by Indian civilization, history of Indian civilization. Then one day decided suddenly to quit his job and focus on unraveling the mysteries of Indian history. So Nilesh, welcome to the discussion and thanks for sparing time.
Thank you. Thank you, Abhay. Namaskar.
So Nilesh, your journey is very, very interesting. And I have been looking at multiple videos on YouTube and you are talking about 24,000 years of Indian civilization. But you must have heard a very famous song, Hindi song. It's an old song. कि सिकंदर ने पोरस से छेड़ी लड़ाई तो मैं क्या करूं? You know, why current youngsters should know this, what you are talking about, our history of Indian civilization, and how it is relevant for them in their today's life?
Well, great question. See, I lived in America now, North America, Canada and USA for close to 30 years. Like I have spent more time of my life in America than in India. Of course, I grew up in India and studied in India. What a nation or a group of people, civilization need is a grand narrative. Like America talks about grand narrative. Many other countries talk about grand narratives. And, you know, it serves a specific purpose. A quick, simple example. When I travel in America, I will come across people who have sometimes not even crossed the state they are living in. You know, they may be first time taking a flight and they may be in their mid 30s and mid 40s. But if you still ask them about what they think of their country, they will say it is the best country in the world. And, you know, jokingly sometime, not sarcastically, I'll ask them, like, have you been to other country or any other countries? And they will say, no, I have not been to other countries. But in their psyche, they have this conviction, right or wrong. And in this case, we can say it's actually a right conviction, you know. But some of the daring things that America has done over the years in terms of innovation and whatnot is precisely because of this spirit of openness and this spirit of they being the best. That conviction is there. Now, to bring it back to this 24,000 years of Bharatiya civilization, it is if we don't know that, you know, if we don't have our grand narrative, and fortunately in case of India, I will say we don't need to synthetically create a grand narrative. It already exists. We have to comprehend it. But the purpose, the role of a grand narrative is very similar to what India already has done, Arsha Kavya, like epics. But I will not go there. So like Neil Armstrong going to the moon, what did it change to rest of the humanity? Other than him, frankly, and maybe the people working at NASA, what did it change? If you just practically look at it, maybe nothing. But in terms of not just for Americans, for the whole world as a humanity, it gave us that confidence we can do these things. So I think that's important.
But you are talking about 24,000 years of Indian civilization. Even there are large number of other Indic experts. They are talking about 5,000, 7,000 years. So from where you actually derived this 24,000 years data?
Mm-hmm. Now, again, wonderful question. So I will give you a summary of it. But since you did refer to many other researchers who might be talking 5,000 and 7,000, it's a question worth asking to them. Okay, so I'll give my answer, but it's a question worth asking to them. Where did they get their 5,000 and 7,000 years? So just a quick summary. I started with Mahabharata. You know, that was my interest, like started in 1995. Then I was working in parallel, you know, when I was doing my corporate job. And then finally I had published a book, but I didn't have a luxury to talk about it. That's why one of the reason, not the only reason, I left the company, the full-time job anyways. Started with Mahabharata, and what it did, what it allowed me to do is when I looked at, I read Mahabharata, I could extract, I didn't know that by the way, but I could extract 300 plus astronomy references. And when you solve that as like a jigsaw puzzle, it's a problem solving. It took me to a very specific year and no other year, like 5561 BC, more than 7,500 years ago. Then I was also working on it. Others people suggested I did the same thing for Ramayana. I found more than 600 references in the Valmiki Ramayana. And again, solving a jigsaw puzzle, it took me to more than 14,000 years ago. Then in 2016, another professor from America suggested me, why don't you work on a dating of Rigveda? And so I did not get any help in astronomy from the field of astronomy. But then I got a lot of evidence from Saraswati, River Saraswati and other rivers, 19 rivers of India. And based on that, the geology data, hydrology data, what I am saying when I say 24,000, actually it is the lower side, meaning we definitely know that it is older than 24,000. So just a summary, I started with astronomy, but there is a evidence from more than dozen plus different disciplines of science, like oceanography, geology, geophysics, hydrology, seismology, genetics, some area that you may find a connection with. We have evidence, corroborative evidence for this timeline, and actually it goes way back. For example, agriculture goes back to like as far back as 43,000 BC. Not many people know it, and everything is available in the peer-reviewed papers.
So you talked about this grand narrative, which we need to actually tell the world that we have such a rich history. But having history is one part of it. How you think it's relevant today to today's youngsters when they are actually leading their life, striving for getting jobs, or actually trying to build a knowledge-based society or an economy?
Mm-hmm. Well, no, what history does is gives you the context to study everything else, which is what? Science, technology, culture, civilization, agriculture. I mean, how did they all grow up? Domestication of animals, how they solve the problems. So life is about problem solving. And when we talk of innovation, it's about problem solving too. And what has happened, for example, if you look at the way British taught us, just like training somebody for an industrial job, so they taught us. So not to even blame them, they had a certain enterprise to run, and therefore they did it. What happened is, even when the situation changed, we as did not think of changing. And I'm not saying the problem is limited to India. The problem is worldwide. But India gets affected a lot because of our unique challenges. So what this context gives you is allows you to study how our ancients, for example, or the people around the world in ancient times, how they solve problems. And it will amaze you the kind of ingenuity that they showed, or the kind of innovation, the interest for accuracy, precision, and practicality. They were extremely pragmatic.
Can you give few examples? Can you give few examples?
Yes, let's look at some, take medicine or related to the human health, for example. Now, as you said, sometimes all we get in our epics or ancient Indian narratives is descriptions. We don't have all the details. But for example, in Rigveda, there is a mention of a Queen Vishpala. And then the description says Ashwini Kumaras came and did a surgery on her leg. She was injured during the war, and then did a surgery. They fixed it, and she could go back to the fighting. Now we would simply look at that as just a story, and that's perfectly fine, as a starting point. But now we said, is this really true? And when people start searching, what you find, I'll mention one. So now there is a evidence, and you can find this, even this is made it to Wikipedia, believe it or not. Usually good stuff about India doesn't go to Wikipedia. That is my experience. The dental surgery, there is a evidence of dental surgery in Sindhu Saraswati civilization, what people will call IVC, but its right name should be Sindhu Saraswati civilization. And the dating of that is actually the drilling of the teeth and then the filling and so on. And the timing of this is 5000 to 7000 BC. So think of this as a surgery. Not many people may know, or some people may know, is the whole discipline of surgery that started, whole surgery association in England. It started after reports came from India of a nose surgery or a nose, you can call it plastic surgery, so to say, rhinoplasty. The evidence came from India, and it was not a textual evidence. Actually, two British men saw a operation being performed on the streets of Pune in 1794, around that. And that started the whole discipline in the West. Whereas right now, you talked about some other researchers, many of our researchers, even today, will not be willing to accept the origin of, say, nose surgery in India. Mm-hmm. So you get evidence like this, and is this just a description? No. If you go to Sushrut Samhita, you get exact verses how to perform that operation. It is in the Shardul Vikridit Vrutta. There are many. I can go on and on, but say just mention a couple here.
Even Surya Siddhanta examples are very interesting. About the precision, about excellence, and it talks really about how Indians were very, very keen on ensuring that their calculations are very, very precise. You can elaborate on some of them also.
Yeah, I will elaborate on Surya Siddhanta, and if you remind me, I will also elaborate on Aryabhatiya. Okay, there are some very interesting things there. But Surya Siddhanta, just to give you again a context, the time context, quickly, I will mention a couple other names besides me, and then of course there are many others. But one of my co-researcher, Mrs. Rupa Bhati, Bhatiji, we have worked together. And then another researcher, he was a former ISRO scientist and now based in Washington, D.C., Dr. Anil Narayanan. So if we think of this as three people together, didn't necessarily work together, what we have identified is close to 6 to 8 different updates to Surya Siddhanta. I will not go into the details, but that takes us the updates to Surya Siddhanta going back to 17,500 years, 14,500 BCE. Now, think it this way. For something that requires an update, it must be already functional. Just like we need some repair to our house, the house must be in a good condition for a while, and it becomes old and now it needs repair. So if you want to find out the functional timing of that Surya Siddhanta, we have to go back another 20,000s before that. So that's the kind of baseline we are talking. Now, in terms of the precision and accuracy, what you will find is the very fact we can detect these specific instances, like, something happened 3000 BC, 5300 BC, 7500 BC, 12,000 BC, 14,500 BC. These are the epochs of making corrections. The corrections were done to Surya Siddhanta. And why do we find those? How can we get that accurately to that time? Because when they made those measurements, they were so precise that they could not be any other.
Okay.
As an illustration, I can mention something, for example.
Go ahead.
Okay. So think of a nakshatras. Nakshatra measurements, the longitudes and latitudes. Now, the longitudes kind of change very fast because of the precession of equinoxes. Now, when I say very fast, every 1,000 years, that's fast in astronomy,
Very true.
But if you go back to the latitudes of nakshatra, the way they are given in Surya Siddhanta versus the way their measurements are today, what Dr. Anil Narayanan did is he did an extremely brute force analysis, consider every single factor, use the latest astronomy data, and reached the conclusion, and I have verified that inference, that these specific, very precise measurements for the nakshatra latitudes were made sometime between 7,500 to 8,000 BC. And that was not the first time they were made. More than likely, they were updated. So that's just a Surya Siddhanta example.
So Nilesh, you are talking about 24,000 of years of Indian civilization. There are other experts which talk about 5,000, 7,000 years of Indian history or Indian civilization history. So if you see, there's a huge difference, 24,000 and 5,000, 7,000. So how, as a third party who doesn't understand this field, how we should reconcile, and what are the real takeaways from this?
Okay. No, great question. Let's leave the reconciling to the side for a minute. Okay, let's even understand how we investigate our past, because that has a direct relevance for how we innovate for the future.
Yeah.
Okay, so there are many science disciplines, but astronomy is one discipline which can give you very precise answers. Now, they could be wrong, okay? So, I mean, because it's somebody's claim, right? They could be wrong, but it is capable of giving precise answers, which no other discipline is capable of. I mean, that's the huge difference. So, for an Indian context, just quickly look at astronomy and say our texts like Surya Siddhanta, Aryabhatiya, and so on. Indian society, ancient society, was extremely practical and pragmatic. They did not waste their time on anything that was not useful to them. So the biggest motivation for astronomy was simply what? Agriculture and commerce, because you're traveling by ships and it's a life or death. You know, if you don't know your exact position. And agriculture, you need to know the exact Rutu cycle, the yearly cycle, monsoon, and all that. So from that, the astronomy came. Therefore, the demand was there for extreme precision. And do we see evidence of that? We absolutely do. You know, so if you take Surya Siddhanta and you look at the specific measurements in Surya Siddhanta, they are so precise. I'll give a couple of examples. One is when we look at those specific measurements, it takes us back to whatever we have investigated to 17,500 years for the updates. They are very, very precise. Okay. Now I'll give you some example and how even Western civilization, when they came in contact with India, something that was so great and they should have celebrated, they made a very little of it, you know, almost like blamed our ancients. The obliquity of the earth, you know, that angle that, Earth's axis has, right now it is around 23.5 degree, you know, that's the inclination. Now, in Surya Siddhanta, it talks of the inclination of around 24 degree. Now, when Burgess, the Western, you know, both American and European scholarship, when they had their hands on Surya Siddhanta, they translated it. They've used, for example, this example of the obliquity to show or to claim that how the Indian astronomers, Hindu astronomers, were of a very inferior kind. They said, look, because the Westerners were thinking the Surya Siddhanta was only 1500 years old, around 580 or so CE. You know? So they said, look, the actual obliquity was 23.4 maybe, or 23.6, somewhere there. But these guys are making such crude measurements, they are calling it 24. The reality is completely different. In fact, what Rupa Bhattiji, one of my co-researcher and myself, what we did is we looked at three different references. I mean, that's how we ended up looking at three different references. Now, remember, to define a line, we need 2 points. To define a curve, we need 3 points. These are 3 points, which is the obliquity, the position of the sun, apogee, we call it, longest distance, and the seasons. When we brought those three together, the only time this condition is true or can be true comes to 12,000 BCE and no other. And I presented my work at Oxford, you know, and they were foaming and frothing at the mouth because they're so used to 1500-year-old Surya Siddhanta, but they couldn't find a single fault. And we were there for 3 days. So there are many examples like this. So Indians were not only pragmatic, but when required, they were interested in precision. Now, they were not obsessed with it, meaning if something could be done with a precision of plus minus 2 days, they were happy to do it that way. And if a precision was required to the thousandth of a second, then they went for it.
Interesting, very interesting. So Nilesh, I am Chief Innovation Officer for Ministry of Human Resource Development. And primarily, our agenda is to promote innovation, entrepreneurship within our youngsters, in our colleges. And we want to create thousands of islands of innovation, actually doing some cutting edge work. Mm-hmm. Now, how you think this knowledge of ancient Indian civilization will help them gain right kind of attitude to pursue innovation and entrepreneurship? Because currently our education system is more of a swallow and vomit kind of a education system. Our students are chasing grades, our students are chasing marks, and even jobs also. So it's in that sense, we are not very entrepreneurial in nature. But if you really look at our ancient society, which was very much entrepreneurial, so what kind of takeaways you would like to highlight based on our your studies of our
Yeah.
ancient civilization, which youngsters should adopt in their
Right.
life now?
Okay, great question. See, what we see in our ancient civilization, I mean, only from the limited references that we have, is that there was a celebration of even failures, which is the great attitude that you see in America, celebration of a failures also. And there also we worry. In India, rather we worry, we don't want to fail, or we don't want to appear as a failure. For example, just a quick story is a story of a Vishwamitra trying to send Trishanku into the Swarga or wherever he was trying to send him. It did not succeed. Okay. But that story is preserved for us. And I'm not saying it's preserved. I don't know the reason why it is preserved for us. In America, you will find that, people are celebrating failures. I mean, I worked for General Electric. It was an amazingly innovative company. And, they were literally celebrate failures. I remember that time. Now, what do we get from our ancient wisdom? For example, as I said, they were pragmatic. They did not do unless there was a benefit. And you can see that there was always this framework of why, how, and what. Even for a moksha that people talk about, the liberation, they also wanted to know, okay, so why moksha? And then once you decide that you want a moksha, what are the things to do? Like, Upanishad will say, Satyena labhyas tapasa yesha atma samyak jnanena brahmacharyena nityam. Very pragmatic, because if it's a Sanskrit, it feels like something complicated. It is not. So it has to start with the why. Then you think of how to do it and what. For example, think of like spending enough time on defining the problem. If I solve this problem, what would be the benefit to the society? Unless you have a quantification of it, like Galileo said, measure everything. And if something is not measurable, make it measurable. And you will find that actually practically done by our ancients. Like they measured everything. So then the another thing they did, once they started working on the problem, they worked at this, what we call in the design of experiment, the orthogonal way. Like, focus on that problem, ceteris paribus, keeping everything else constant. And therefore they were successful. So the jugaad has a place, but they did not always use the jugaad. Sometimes they were very methodical. Other times they also used the whole jugaad, bringing it together. So you can see a lot of these insights, in terms of Nyaya Darshana, like logical reasoning. And so even Einstein said, or at least it's quoted, it is attributed to Einstein. He said, if you have a 1 hour, spend close to 45 minutes defining the problem and then use last 10-15 minutes solving it. If you have got the right problem, the solution would emerge more like the mixing of a buttermilk and the butter comes to the top. But many times what happens, I've seen that in India, sometimes it happens here too, that we have been given some money and sometimes some subject and said do something. So therefore people do something and that may not have any relevance to the society. So always start with the why and spend enough time and then act very fast. The reason is, and that's what our ancients did. You can see examples time after time, like Rama going to Lanka, for example. Once he decided that's the course of action, they went. The success or failure, that's not in your hand. So why we need to act swiftly, and that's what we can get this wisdom from the past, is because if you don't act swiftly, then the situation changes. So the solution that you may come up with, either somebody else would come up with that, or the solution is no longer relevant.
So I think we can close down on this extremely pragmatic note. Nilesh, thanks for sparing time and talking to us. I think large number of youngsters will really gain great insights from our discussion and will pursue the path of innovation and entrepreneurship as it was suggested by our scriptures long ago. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you for inviting me.